So after a little bit of a hiatus, we're going to be returning to the planets for each Ascendant series. And we've been looking at Taurus, and the two planets we have to finish up with are Jupiter for Taurus and Saturn for Taurus. We're going to first look at Saturn for Taurus. Now we have to remember that each of these planets relates to the particular ascendant sign in a way that helps to define that sign. Meaning that whenever you think about Taurus, the qualities that you know about Taurus are based not only on simply the fact that Taurus is the second sign of the zodiac, but also in reference to how each planet relates to that zodiac sign as though that sign is the first house. So Saturn, for example, rules houses 9 and 10. Now Taurus we often think about as being very steadfast on their path. We often think about them being stubborn, hard to change, good at moving forward despite all obstacles. And yes, it does have to do with the fact that we're looking at the second sign of the zodiac. It also has to do with the fact that Taurus is an earth sign. But it's Saturn's rulership of the 9th and 10th houses that contributes to this. And why is that? Because the 10th house, which Saturn rules, deals with the karma bhava, or the karma that we're known for, the karma that we get involved with in this world. So when we have Saturn ruling the 10th house, Saturn is a planet that when it's functioning in its strongest capacity, it's going to continue moving forward despite all obstacles. It's going to be able to suffer through the difficulties and still press on. It's not going to back down just because some adversity comes up. When Saturn rules the 9th house, which is a house that deals with our sense of purpose and our direction in life, we're going to find that same quality shining through. That oftentimes a Taurus ascendant can be very fixated and very structured in their approach to their path to purpose in life. They're also going to be hard to get derailed from their path or their purpose in life. And that's because Saturn, being the planet of greatness, ruling the 9th and the 10th house, will show an individual who, when they put their mind to something, no matter what odds come their way, they will still do their best to try and succeed. And this reminds me, this morning I had also done a talk for the Kriya Yoga apprenticeship program. And in that program, we were discussing the Gita and the chapter on the yoga of universal revelation. And when we practice yoga, when we live our lives, when we study the Gita, when we go deeper into meditation, we start to realize that everything we do in this world and in this body is to exhaust a karma. And as we are little human beings working through a nervous system and a body, we don't always know exactly why things work out the way they do. And so it's encouraged in the Gita for Arjuna, who's considered the spiritual seeker, to continue to fight the war, the internal struggle to win through to true self-realization. And when we have a Taurus ascendant, we can often find a person tapping into their Saturn, which will give them steadfastness to continue through the difficulties. And that's a Saturnine quality. And it's, again, the fact that Saturn rules the 9th and the 10th houses that gives Taurus this quality. Now, when we think about Saturn, there's a few other things to be aware of. Number one is that for a Taurus ascendant, Saturn is debilitated in the 12th house. Saturn is exalted in the 6th house. So Saturn is debilitated in the 12th and exalted in the 6th, which means that the higher, clearer manifestation for a Taurus ascendant, if you're really working with the blueprint of your ascendant well, you're going to find that Taurus types benefit by being in very service-related positions. They're here to get into the daily grind of the world. They're here to help the less fortunate. The 12th house, while it deals with losses and expenses, The 12th house also deals with things like escaping from the world, retreats, vacations, and so on. And when we think about the 9th and 10th Lord being debilitated in the 12th house, it can show that a Taurus ascendant wastes a lot of time and a lot of resources and a lot of energy trying to get away from the world. I mean, they're not fulfilling their astrological blueprint. So Taurus is a Venus-ruled sign, and Venus types typically do like luxuries. But for a Taurus ascendant, the luxuries are meant to be enjoyed after they've done the hard work to be of service to the world. And again, when we think about the fact that Saturn rules the 9th and the 10th houses, and it gets exalted in the 6th, 10th, direction, karma, the karmic impact someone has on the world, the 9th, a sense of purpose, a sense of greater well-being, a sense of supporting society, fitting into the whole. Taking those 2 house lords and sticking them exalted in the 6th house is always going to show that a Taurus ascendant will be happier, will be fulfilling their destiny more profoundly if they direct their work and their purpose towards 6th house related things, which again is what? Taking care of the basics of life, helping others to take care of the basics of life, having a service-oriented job or position, directing or using their prestige and power and honor to support the rest of society, the people that are less fortunate than them. Now, Saturn ruling the 9th and 10th, that shows that it is a very profound quality energy for a Taurus ascendant. And we have to remember that all these planets have a healthy expression as well as a unhealthy or imbalanced expression. When Saturn becomes too strong, or a person becomes too fixated on Saturn with the Taurus ascendant, the individual often becomes too controlling. They try to dominate others. They don't necessarily make room for grace. When Saturn is more auspicious, the person knows when it is a good time to simply suffer through a difficulty, or when to surrender to life. That's always the important thing with Saturn. It's too far, the person becomes too controlling because they're afraid of the difficulties that might come if they fail. But when it's balanced, that Saturn quality allows the Taurus ascendant to know when it is appropriate to surrender and let go. Going back to the idea of the Gita and the spiritual war as a metaphor, so we don't have to take that, we don't have to be militant about it. It's just a metaphor, the way the Gita functions. But when we think about the Gita and when we think about the idea of war, when a soldier goes to war, the soldier does their best. They know they can't control outcomes, but they do their best to follow orders, to listen to authorities, to surrender to a power that might be greater than them. And if they succeed or fail, that's not something to stress out about, because again, the soldier doesn't have the bigger picture that the general does. The general sees the thousands of soldiers scattered across the field, and so the soldier might not understand why they need to do what they're meant to do, but it's integral to the strategy of the entire campaign. So a good Saturn is able to surrender to a higher power, but also able to endure the difficulties when they arise. And that's one thing that I've noticed a lot of people who seek out astrological sessions, or even people just simply interested in yoga and improving their life, they have a real hard time with that, because they're really trying to control everything, make everything work perfectly as they imagine it should, and their limited understanding as a personality, rather than trying to figure out what the bigger picture is. So again, when we think about Saturn and Taurus ascendant, it's a very important planet. It rules the 9th and the 10th houses, both houses of activity, the 10th house, and grace. It's exalted in the 6th house, which shows that when a Taurus ascendant emphasizes 6th house issues, they tend to, in the long run, be happier, more successful, more connected to the wholeness of life. And we think about Saturn being debilitated in the 12th house for a Taurus ascendant. That's going to show that trying to work simply to retire or trying to work simply to go on vacation. That's not really the clear or healthiest manifestation of a Taurus ascendant. So these are some ideas to consider with a Taurus ascendant. And we could speak about how Saturn gives Raj Yoga, but you really need to understand how those yogas function. And there's a lot of mathematics that go into that, which is one of the reasons why you might have gone to astrologers and they say, oh, you have this wonderful Raj Yoga, and you always wonder why it never pans out. Or maybe you have a lot of success in your life, but you don't have any Raj Yogas, and you wonder why that's the case. It's because there's a lot of math that goes into that. And of course, if you want to learn more about that, you can participate in the Astrological Apprenticeship Program at Asheville Vedic Astrology. But for now, let's go ahead and move on to Jupiter.